To begin the radicals unit, I just want to review a few pieces of information about radicals. So any kind of radical would have this symbol here. We often call that the square root here. It's not necessarily always a square root. So if we look at this example, you can see a cube root. The number out front is called the coefficient. The small little number here is called the index, and the number underneath the radical sign is called the radicand. There's restrictions when we look at certain radicals. If you have a radical with an even index, it cannot have a negative radicand. So for example, I can't square root -2. That's not possible. So if we've got variables under there, we have to set the radicand greater than or equal to 0. So the restriction for this would be x is greater than or equal to 0. If we look at example 2, we would set the radicand greater than equal to 0 or equal to 0 and isolate x. So if we move the x to the other side so that we can keep it positive x, it would look like this. Of course, that looks backwards, so we're going to rewrite this over here so that we can see the inequality sign still pointing to the x value, and x would be less than or equal to 3. So that would mean that any value I choose for x has to be less than 3 to keep this radical positive. So for example, if I picked 2, which is less than 3, 3 minus 2 still gives me a positive number of 1. If I picked a larger number, so for example, I picked 4, 3 minus 4 would give me -1, so that would not meet the requirements for the x value. So that's why we have restrictions. If you have a radical with an odd index, you can have a negative radicand because we can cube root or fifth root, etc., negative numbers. So for example, if we did the cube root of -8, it equals -2. So you're not going to need to write restrictions on variables for odd index radicals.